Good morning, Mr. Joseph. How are you? Joseph, how are you? Morning, Mr. Campus. How are you? Please be reminded that our program will start at 9 o'clock. Very good morning, everyone. How are you all? I hope you all doing well. And let me check my sound. Can you hear me well?
Yes,
Yes.
po.
Yes po, loud and clear.
Thank you. Now let me check our permanent speakers. Mr. Katprum Suchitra, are you with us? Professor Dr. Semus Otama, are you with us? Everyone, please be reminded that our program will start at 9 o'clock. That is 7 minutes more. So I hope the program today will be very beneficial to you, and please prepare us your own questions regarding to the topic that our speakers are going to share today. And at Q&A sessions, we will raise up your questions. You can type in the chat box, or you can raise your hand to ask a question during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Professor Dr. Semus Otama. How are you?
How are you? I'm good. I'm good. I was just checking to make sure that you could see me, and I just wanted to check with the slides. Will I be sharing them, or will you be sharing them from your side?
Yes, sir. Regarding to your picture and sounds very clear, and the slide, if you can share, that will be good. But if you prefer us to share for you, that's fine. Our technical team will work for you.
Okay, it's no problem. I'm happy to share. I just need to. I'm not used to Google Meet, so you just need to explain to me how I share. Oh, I see the button here, I think.
You can click on the arrow button up. You see next to the face.
the arrow button up. I think I'm pressing it now. Share now. Okay. Can I just share for a moment and just to make sure?
Yeah, please.
Open systems preferences, grant access. Okay. Okay. I just need to fix that. Okay. Click to unlock. Okay. Google Chrome will not be able to record the contents of your screen until it quits. Okay. 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 Go to the screen. Is this one?
Is it working fine, sir?
Google Chrome might not have screen recording permission. Okay, that's okay. Nothing happened there now, no?
No, we cannot see.
I think it might be, I haven't used this before, and I think it's probably can't share your screen. System preferences, okay.
If
Okay.
we can share for you, it's no problem. If
I think you might have to, because I think it's not allowing me to do that.
yes, sir, no problem. Our technical team will work to share for you.
Yeah, I think you'll have to, because the preferences here on my computer are not allowing me to share. So I think you're going to have to. And I just might, while I'm waiting, I just might adjust my screen here a little bit. It's maybe a little bit low.
Okay, sir.
Okay, the background is probably not great, but it's all I have. I can change the wall. Is it okay?
That's okay. It's good to, it's good enough. So
Yeah, because I could try on that wall. Maybe is that better? Would that be better?
yeah, I think here's better. Here's better. So
Where I am now is better.
yes, it's better.
Okay,
You look handsome.
As long as that makes sense, that's the most important thing. Okay.
Okay. Let me check our speakers. Mr. Khan from Sechatra, are you with us now? Everyone, due to the technical problem, we delay for 5 minutes. We will start in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Padang DJ alam Fiado Susion, ang sitwasyon sa lain para itong gamanasapaan. Nasamtala itong gisabisar mga kaigsuran, na ito ang linya, ito ni katrusada ang
Once again, good morning, honorable speaker, distinguished guests, school principals, teachers, students, ladies and gentlemen. We are pleased to welcome you to the international webinar on the themes lifelong learning for technical education in the digital era, hosted by SEAMEO. I am Lin Chung-rong from Public Relations and Partnership Division of SEAMEO, Cambodia. It is my great pleasure and honor to be your moderator for the webinar today. Honorable speaker, distinguished guests, and all participants, please kindly be informed that this webinar will be recorded for the documentation purpose of SEAMEO. So first of all, let me introduce the agenda of our program today. We have 5 agendas for today. First of all, we have commencements with SEAMEO color and SEAMEO song. Welcome remark by Mr. Katram Sijatra, Deputy Director for Administration, SEAMEO. Presentation and discussion by Professor Dr. Semus Otama, Director of ACE Adult Continuing Education at University College Cork, Ireland. Topic of his presentation is lifelong learning for technical education in the digital era, scaffolding verified learning capital, followed by Q&A sessions and wrap-up session by moderator. Thank you. Now, may we commence the webinar with the SEAMEO color and SEAMEO song.
bright and promising future will rise to the call of the times and create a stronger tomorrow. Let's start to make a difference, teaching everyone to learn through science, health, and technology. We will share our expertise by promoting knowledge and policies. We can build a better world. Let us take a stand for our visions alone, making future plans for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and greed. Hear us SEAMEO, building the future is our legacy. We'll achieve our goals through partnership, creating opportunities. By working hand in hand, we can accomplish all our dreams. For a better quality of life is now within our reach. Let us take a stand for our visions alone, making future plans for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and greed. Here at SEAMEO, building the future is our legacy. Let us take a stand for our visions alone, making future plans for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and greed. Here at SEAMEO, building the future is our legacy. Building the future is our legacy. At SEAMEO,
Thank you very much for your attention. During the webinar, I would like to encourage all participants to mute your microphones and please raise your hand and state your question or type it in the chat box. By stating your name, school, institutions, and country, your question will be answered by our keynote speakers in the Q&A sessions. Be reminded that e-certificates of the participation will be issued for participants who successfully fill up the evaluation form, which will be sent into the chat box at the end of the Q&A session by our technical team. Up next, may I give you the brief introduction to our webinar. Continuing TVET involves ongoing training to upgrade existing skills and to develop new ones, and has a much higher profiles. Aging society and knowledge-based economies increase connections of the importance of human capital for economic growth and social development made it necessary to increase learning opportunity for adults in the workplace within the wider context of policies and strategies for lifelong learning. Lifelong learning is the digital era is characterized by the increasing digitalization of society and a growing network and hybrid organization of humans activity. In this era, lifelong learning needs to relate to how digitalization and hybrid networks organization blur earlier established boundaries of content, place, technology, time, and social setting. Chatmark 2021 and Gens at 2019, Peter Romero 2000. Moreover, lifelong learning is emphasized to occur in various formal, informal, non-formal settings that people participate throughout their lifespan. Therefore, today, SEAMEO TED, in collaboration with University of Ireland, organized an international webinar on the important themes lifelong learning for technical education in digital era. This webinar is expected to allow our eminent speaker to share his knowledge, expertise, and experience regarding to lifelong learning for technical education, to discuss possible solutions to this particular issue and challenges of lifelong learning for technical education in digital era. Distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to introduce and invite Mr. Katprom Sachetra, Deputy Director of SEAMEO TED, to deliver his opening remark. And Mr. Katprom Sachetra is the Deputy Director of SEAMEO TED and the Dean of Business Faculty at National Institute of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. He's earned a postgraduate diploma in Management Business Entrepreneurship from Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India and Master of Business Administration from National University of Management. He has entitled as Human Resource Management for BV International Retail Co. Ltd. for 2 years. He is co-founder of Master Career Service in Recruiting and Orientation and Training New Staff, and consultation service for new enterprise creations in extending support and consulting to the existing entrepreneur and business transformation. He has consultancy service experience with local and international NGOs and company on project evaluation, policy development, and capacity building. Training such as ILOs, COICA, ABD, ADB, World Vision, APTEC, EU, Global COP, US, UNIDO, and UNESCO. Last but not least, he's also started to import healthy supplements and beauty care products from Australia and New Zealand. Mr. Katprom Sachetra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chamrong, for brief biography. And very good morning, Professor Dr. Simos Otoma, Director of Adult Continuing Education, School Manager, Teachers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Today, we are delighted to welcome you to our online webinar on lifelong learning for technical education in digital era. Lifelong learning is an essential component in today's world, and it's crucial to keep our skill and knowledge up to date to meet the demand of ever-changing digital era. Through this webinar, you will gain insight into the latest trend in technical education and how you can leverage digital technology to upgrade your skill and knowledge in the field. You will also learn about the benefits and opportunities of lifelong learning and how it can help you in your professional and personal growth. As technology continues to advance and rapid paces, the need for lifelong learning in technical education becomes increasingly important. In the digital era, technical education must adapt and constantly evolve to keep up with the latest technology trends and development. Lifelong learning is the process of continued learning and professional development through one career. In the past, technical education was often limited to formal schooling and training program. However, with the development of online resources and digital tools, it is now possible for individuals to continue learning and improving their skill, even after completing formal education program. One of the key benefits of lifelong learning in technical education is the ability to stay relevant and competitive in the job market. As new technologies and techniques emerge, individuals who continue their education and stay up to date with the latest trend with have competitive edge over their peers. Lifelong learning can also lead to increased job satisfaction and career development opportunities. By continually improve their skill and knowledge, individuals can take on new responsibility and role with their organization, leading the greatest success and personal satisfaction. In order to facilitate lifelong learning in technical education, it is important for educator, training provider to offer flexible and accessible learning opportunities through online courses, webinar, and virtual workshop can provide individuals with opportunity to learn at their own pace and on their own schedule. Today, our faculty, Professor Dr. Simus, Director of Adult Continuing Education, have carefully designed this program to provide you with a comprehensive understanding of lifelong learning in technical education. We guarantee that you will live with a deeper understanding of the subject and a new perspective on value of lifelong learning. We hope you find this webinar enriched and engaging. Let's embark on this learning journey together, and let's keep learning for life. Finally, I sincerely hope that the discussion in the webinar and the information shared can be applied effectively in your role in your school, college. With these few remarks, I thank you for listening to me and declare the webinar officially open. May you have a productive and successful training workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kat from Sejahtera, for your insightful and inspiring remarks. I would like to express my gratitude again to you for spending your valuable time in delivering your remarks. Honorable speaker, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you all to turn on the camera with beautiful smiles for the photo session. Our technical team will have us take the pictures. Please. Please get yourself ready. Yeah. Turn on your camera with beautiful smile. I will count for each shot. We are going to have 3 time shot. First shot. And count. 3, 2, 1. Second shot. 3, 2, 1. Last but not least shot. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, everyone, for your lovely smiles. Distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, up next, I would like to introduce and invite our keynote speaker to deliver his presentation, Professor Dr. Simus Tama, Director of ACE Adult Continuing Education at University College Cork, Ireland's oldest university center for the delivery of adult and continuing education. He also has senior lectureship in political science at the Department of Government, UCC. He previously managed the Center for European Social Research, at the time the largest non-governmental social research center in Ireland. His current research is focused on applying theories of respect, recognition, dignity, and rights in the fields of adult education. His other research interests include democracy and social context of science and technology and the law. He is a professionally trained journalist and was formerly a professional youth and community worker. Professor Dr. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And thank you also to the director for his introduction earlier. I'm very pleased to be here, to have this opportunity to speak to you today. Basically, I want to contextualize the lifelong learning journey around 5 capitals, and obviously contextualize this as well in relation to technical education. To begin with, I suppose maybe if I'm not sure if you can share my slides, and then we can start.
Yes, Doctor. Our technical team will share your slide.
Okay. I'm sorry, I've been unable to share them myself, but I had some technical issues here. So as I mentioned already, the idea here is looking at lifelong learning for technical education in the digital era, and scaffolding this around the 5 learning capitals. Okay, so maybe we can just move to the next slide. Okay, so in 2023, I would say the world got some major wake-up calls. One of the wake-up calls was around artificial intelligence, and I suppose it came as a surprise to many people in the world that artificial intelligence was a thing, although those of us working in the technical areas would have known that artificial intelligence has been around for quite a while. But ChatGPT was, I think, one of the things that really raised people's consciousness in a broader sense around artificial intelligence. And I know, for instance, in my university, ChatGPT created a whole conversation around students' assignments and so on and so forth. But I suppose the bigger question isn't really about ChatGPT, it's about where is artificial intelligence taking us in terms of the future of our planet, the future of work, the future of your possibilities, and even ultimately the future of humanity as the primary drivers of planetary activity. Robotics, again, I think this became we became very conscious of robotics and the possibilities of robotics in terms of action in the workplace, replacing jobs, and so on. We saw a lot of things around technological innovations, what I would say in terms of both war and peace. For instance, the war in Ukraine has brought a whole new dimension around how warfare is conducted through drones, especially airborne and waterborne drones, and so on. And obviously, things like drones are becoming a bigger part in terms of the supply chain around us. Climate crisis was the other thing I think that was a major wake-up call for us in 2023, because we have had unprecedented climatic episodes in 2023 right across the globe, every place. Even before I came here, about 2 days before I left, there was an unprecedented flood in my neighborhood. My house almost became flooded, but all the local roads were completely submerged, bridges covered, and so on and so forth. And my local town, all the shops were flooded and so on. And this is unprecedented. This had never happened before. But these kinds of events happened right across the planet in 2023. So I suppose I just wanted to mention those things as a starting point, as a context creating one. And I just wanted to also mention the idea of letting no one behind, and letting no one behind in a digital age in particular, because the idea that we let no one behind is a common slogan used by UNESCO, but the idea is that the future should be for everybody. And I was very impressed with the SEAMEO song, because the SEAMEO song reflects many of those concepts and ideas as well. So now maybe we could just move to the next slide. So these are not definitive quotes. These are just some quotes that give some sort of context in terms of where we are, in terms of the digital age in which we live. And I just picked 3 quotes here. We could pick 3,000 quotes. They would all be saying very, very similar things. These ones are references to Southeast Asia, as you can see. So they say generative AI is quickly changing the landscape of the business world with rapid adoption rates across nearly every industry. Now, what does that say? Well, that tells us that all of industry is going through a dramatic change, sometimes referred to as the fourth industrial revolution. And we see this, I suppose, in every aspect of our lives when we engage that digital technology is becoming ever present. And artificial intelligence is now critically driving that agenda. Then we see the second quote says, we see an exponential acceleration of digitization across industry since the onset of the pandemic. And I can tell you that this was, I suppose, as somebody working in the education sector, this is one thing we saw dramatically changing during the pandemic, the extent to which we went online with everything. And here we are today, online. And I see there are people from many countries engaged in this conversation this morning. So it's creating demand and for specialists in IT roles. And I'm going to come to that in just a little bit around these specializations. And I'm not going to get too far into the details on the technical side of it, because you are the experts on that more than I am. And then the third quote says, it's no surprise that jobs and salaries in tech have been on the rise in recent years. The Southeast Asia tech landscape has flourished lately, bringing a strong demand for tech jobs across the region. Now, of course, that applies to virtually every region in the world, but Southeast Asia, I suppose, is a particular place because the potential in Southeast Asia is considerable in terms of creating and driving the future economy on the planet. So you are in a special place in that regard. So maybe we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so I did what I spoke to the person who gave us the wake-up call, ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT a few questions, and these were the answers they gave. So this is don't take this too seriously, but it's just to give you a sense. So I asked ChatGPT what were the main tech jobs in Southeast Asia in 2003. You can see these in the blue section. And then I said, what are the jobs that are going to be there in the next 5 years? And you can see some of the jobs are the same. Quite a lot of them are different. And then I said, what are the jobs going to be like in 2043? Of course, ChatGPT doesn't know the answer to this question. No, none of us know the answer to this question, and there's no amount of predicting can answer these questions. But this is speculation. But even in the speculation, you can see that the tech jobs are very, very different. But it was interesting that ChatGPT also had some advice for us. It said, it's important for individuals seeking a career in tech to stay adaptable, continuously learn, and be ready to embrace emerging technologies and industries. You know, so that's, I think, pretty good advice from ChatGPT in terms of what we need to do. And it's re-emphasizing the concept and idea of lifelong learning. And I suppose if we think about the paradigm in front of us here, if we look at somebody who graduated with a, let's say, a computer science degree in 2003, the jobs they would be looking at there are in the blue column. The kind of jobs they would be looking at now are in the yellow column. And, you know, they may be still working in 2043, it could well be. They're looking at entirely different ones. So the point I would make is that the knowledge that you acquire in your current areas of study, or that you graduate with, or you currently have, are very unlikely to be the ones that will be still useful to you as your career progresses, especially in the tech sector. There probably are areas, maybe in traditional skills and things like that, where things don't change so much. But even in those areas, the influence of digitization is becoming critically important. So I just wanted to just briefly use those as a beginning point, as it were, to the kinds of things I want to talk to you today about in relation to learning capitals. So maybe we could move now to the next slide. Okay, so the context, I want to create context here. The first piece of context I want to create, to highlight, is the idea of reflexive modernity. Reflexive modernity is a way of describing the world in which we currently are. When I talk about reflexive modernity, I talk about the sense with which each one of us has an identity portfolio. We have ideas around our consumption, our fashion, our personal identity, and so on and so forth, that we build and nourish and project. And what is really interesting is if you observe younger people in particular, younger people spend a lot of time with their mobile devices in terms of their image and doing videos and so on and so forth, and taking selfies and all of this, and creating an image. And this is the idea of reflexive modernity. This is important because it's about how we see ourselves as beings, as human beings, each one of us individually. And of course, this expresses itself in nuanced ways across the planet, but it is happening everywhere and in all societies. The reason why I think this is important is because we need to couch everything we say, everything we think about, and everything we design in terms of learning journeys around that, because this is going to be critically important. And you will see that in my list of capitals there, directly above reflexive modernity, is identity capital, and I will come to that one in a little while, because that is critically important. Now, I'm going to talk about these 5 capitals, starting with seed capital, then identity capital, cultural capital, social capital, and human capital. And my contention is that all 5 of these are really, really important in terms of your learning journey, in terms of how we build a learning journey, and how we stay current in the learning journey. So maybe we can just move to the next slide. I'm beginning with seed capital. And seed capital is the idea that it represents the baseline of which the learner starts. So maybe if we were looking at this in the 1950s, we would be talking about things like literacy skills, numeracy skills, and so on and so forth. Today, we very often talk about digital skills. What digital skills does a person have? But also includes the person's capacity to accumulate. So to go from where they currently are to the next stages that they want to get to. And the opportunity for them to invest with a reasonable chance of success, whatever capital they already have. And this is important around non-formal and informal learning in particular, that people who learn things in informal and non-formal learning, that this can be recognized and this can be used by them going forward. So we can maybe move to the next slide. So in terms of seed capital, parental education will contribute to informational power directed at and to forms of influence. What this says is that we shouldn't just think about the younger people in terms of the educational process and lifelong learning. We also need to think about parents. We need to think about people who are influencers. So this is why adult education is very, very important. And in relation to nobody being left behind, it's also really, really important that we don't leave anybody behind, including older adults. And just an example here was that youth whose sole parents' highest level of education is a degree were almost 3 times more likely to go to university than a youth whose sole parent has no post-school qualifications. So basically, what I want to try and emphasize here is that seed capital is at some level an intergenerational thing as well, the same way as other kinds of capital are. So it's important that we have systems that support individuals to generate seed capital, that they can get into the system, that they can progress. I often use the example of my own city in Cork in Ireland. The Apple headquarters for Europe are in Cork, and they have been in Cork for a long time. The campus for Apple Computers is a huge campus with 2,000-3,000 workers there, highly paid workers mostly. But it's also in the most socioeconomically disadvantaged neighborhood in Cork. And then the question is, how many people in that socioeconomically deprived area will get jobs in Apple? Mostly they will get jobs in areas like security, in areas like cleaning, and so on. They won't get the high-end jobs. And the reason is that very many of these people do not have the seed capital to begin their learning journey. But even if they have the seed capital, it's going to be a long journey for them. Now, maybe we can just move on to our next slide. So, as I mentioned already, letting no one behind is critically important. And we can talk about parents whose education language status, educational attainment, literacy practice at home, and literacy proficiency. These things are really, really important. So what happens in the home around literacy, reading, and so on and so forth are critically important. And that is no less important today in a digital age. And education is the most important indicator of participation in adult education. So basically what this tells us is that those that already have some education are the ones most likely to continue. But the big question is, the forgotten 90%. Those who did not participate. These are the ones who are constantly left behind. And in a digital age, this is becoming increasingly challenging. And we saw that very much during the pandemic, where people who were outside of the digital, didn't have digital competency, were definitely at a huge disadvantage. The partially met demand, what I want to talk about there is that those people who are already have had some seed capital and have invested some seed capital are the ones who make most demands on the system. And this shows that the critical thing here is that there's mechanisms created for people to progress. And in order to, I suppose, start to bridge these gaps, we need investment and we need outreach. We need to be getting out into the community, engaging with those people who are currently being left behind. So can we just move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so identity capital is about the individual's self-esteem and dignity as a member of a community. And this is greatly enhanced through all kinds of education, as is there through adult education, but this is through all types of education. Our identity is greatly enhanced because we become more self-aware. We become effectively a new person in a new context. And you know this yourselves, as you transitioned through educational systems, you took on a new identity and a new concept of yourself. And education, all kinds of education, is critically important around that. But in terms of being able to contribute to your community and being able to make a real contribution, identity capital is extremely important. So we just maybe move on to the next slide. Not sure what's happening there. Okay, right. So basically, I suppose around identity, I just wanted to, I suppose, highlight two things, I suppose, that are happening simultaneously. And the first refers back a little bit to my first slide, where I spoke about the wake-up call for 2023. But there are certain existential threats, or challenges maybe is a better word than threats, that are facing us. AI is one of them. So AI can be an extremely useful tool in terms of creating all kinds of opportunities and so on and so forth, but it could potentially also displace jobs and work and do other kinds of things. So it's something that I suppose is a challenge rather than a threat, but we need to be, there's some raised hands I just see there. Do I need to address the people with the raised hands? I'm not sure what the format is. Maybe Rian, you can tell me.
Sure, we can have you, Professor. We can hear
Yeah,
you.
there's a number of people have raised hands there. Do I deal with questions there now, or are we going to deal with them at the end?
Yes, we will have a Q&A session at the end, sir.
Okay, all right. So I'll just keep going. So sorry, those people with the raised hands at the moment. We will wait until the end, and then we can deal with them there. Climate. Now I don't have to re-emphasize that. We've seen that. Security. We've seen that in terms of the outbreak of two terrible wars recently in the Middle East and in Ukraine. Health. We saw this during COVID. Poverty, which is a persistent problem. Migration, more people are moving around the world today than any time in human history. Food, there's constant challenge to produce food, and with climate change, this can become a greater challenge, and the whole ecological system is under challenge right across the planet. So that's one side of it. And then on the other side, we have factors like communications, the whole, emergence of IT, the internet, and all of these things. And, I suppose we can see the internet as kind of a stable and existing thing now, but it's a very new phenomenon. If you think about how long it took for the printed press to impact in Europe, where, when it was invented in Europe, initially it printed the Bible, I think, and this eventually moved around. But ultimately, it transformed the society. But it took a long time for that to happen. You think about how quickly digitization is operating, and the communication systems around digitization are operating. It's a completely different scale of speed and complexity and the speed of change. Globalization. So we see globalization in all kinds of areas. For instance, here in Southeast Asia, I have seen lots of evidence of people celebrating an Irish festival, which came as a surprise to me a little bit, that people here are celebrating an Irish festival. Most people who were celebrating the Irish festival here in Southeast Asia probably didn't realize they were celebrating an Irish festival. And the Irish festival I'm talking about, of course, is Halloween. People probably thought that was an American festival or something like that. But Halloween is a Celtic festival, historical Celtic festival. It's a festival around the changes of the seasons. It's in the Irish language, it's Iha Hauna, which means the night of Samhain. And Samhain is a new Celtic season in the calendar. In my calendar in Ireland, this month that we are now in is called Samhain. So Iha Hauna, Halloween, is the advent of Samhain. It's celebrating the autumn, the harvest, and it's preparing us for the winter season. Now, through globalization, this festival, which would have been, when I was a child, confined entirely to Ireland, and people outside of Ireland probably didn't know very much about this, somehow got transferred to America, and then from America transferred right around the world. We also have waning conventions. We see this right across the planet, where people are less bound by traditional conventions, less bound by traditions, less bound by norms. So we're dealing with a much more flexible world, and this is playing out in a digital context. And digitization is actually supporting and enabling this to happen, because what happens now in one part of the planet can be instantly known about in another part of the planet. So I'm speaking to you here today in Phnom Penh. Somebody can be watching this in Ireland, in Los Angeles, in Manila. It doesn't matter. They can watch it in any place instantaneously. So maybe we could just move to the next slide. So in terms of identity and autonomy, so identity is about how we participate socially and develop our own self-image. So if we think about identity going right back to when you were a baby, you, through a process called double contingency, you discovered who you were. Through interaction with those around you, you learned to laugh and smile, and you picked up language and so on and so forth. So identity is critically important in terms of how we understand ourselves and how we participate. And it's increasingly important today in a society that's shaped by reflexivity. So in this world, I think the quote from Honneth there, I'm sorry that the writing is a little bit small, we place ourselves at the center of our own life planning and practice. And this is important. This is what is now happening. It's more so among younger people, but it's also true of older people, where we are shaping and creating our identity, and we are at the center of this ourselves, and we are curating this ourselves. And this is part of the digital world in which we live. And in terms of how we understand education and training, we have to remember this about the individuals, this about the learners who are at the center of our in terms of our endeavors, to intellectually strategize and make decisions affecting our own, life courses, basically. So here we're saying is that people need the autonomy to make decisions around their identities. And we see this around consumption, for instance. We see it around fashion. We see it around identity, gender identity, religious identity, all kinds of identity factors. So basically, in this world, we have to be very, very, very conscious of identity, much more so maybe than we needed to be in the past. If you think about more traditional societies, identity was very much presubscribed to you, and you followed a certain way of transgressing through your life according to different stages that were already preset. That is no longer the case. And that's important in terms of how we deliver with education and training. It's important in terms of how we engage with technologies and so on. Okay, so we'll just move on again, please. Okay, we also talk about cultural capital, and cultural capital can be understood in a number of different ways. And one way in which cultural capital is important is that people who live in society have the cultural capital to fully participate in society. And if we think about the overwhelming majority of people who are excluded, I suppose, from mainstream education, mainstream training, higher in jobs, and so on and so forth, they very often are excluded from the cultural capital of those that are more successful. We need to recognize and validate cultural capital regardless of where it has been earned. Now, this has implications for the kinds of cultural capital that come from ethnic minorities, migrants, and so on and so forth, but also applies to cultural capital obtained from people who haven't had the same educational or other advantages that people who have been highly successful or are in well-placed positions in society has. Everyone has an opportunity to extend their cultural capital in an effective way to allow them to identify their priorities, goals, and ambitions. And this is really, really important in terms of how we look at education and training, and we look at how the world is being shaped. In Europe, for instance, there's a lot of battles around culture and cultural wars about the respect for different cultures and so on and so forth. So this is a really, really important issue in terms of how we respect different cultures and how we include different cultures. Also, it's important in terms of cultural capital to acknowledge the positive set of mutually beneficial resources and richness that is generated in complex and diverse societies. And I would say to those of you living in Southeast Asia, you are living in one of the most, one of the richest and most complex and diverse societies on the planet. And this gives you so many advantages. It gives you advantages in terms of the quality of your life, but also gives you advantages in terms of your competitiveness as economic actors. It gives you all kinds of advantages. It's like biodiversity. You know, the more biodiversity, the more robust and stable and sustainable that ecosystem is. It's the same here in relation to this. So I think in terms of cultural capital, this is a really, really important aspect of what you have. And it's something that is critically important to safeguard in terms of everything you do, and that has to be included in terms of how you design and implement training as well. That you ensure that various cultural capitals are not being wound down or depleted. Okay, so we just move to the next one. And here, just giving you some senses of how cultural capital, plays out in terms of people's lives. So having a voice, capacity, and opportunity to be active agents in shaping of your life. So, I mean, this is around whether or not your social capital is respected. And if your social capital is respected, then you can do all of these things. If your social capital is not respected, you are limited in terms of your capacity to achieve those things, of having a voice. And having a voice is one of the most important aspects in terms of personal autonomy. It's about being accepted and belonging. So it's about being part of society. And it's about going beyond the status quo of tolerance, coexistence, and respect for difference. It's about celebrating that difference. It's about celebrating different aspects of culture. Again, I suppose some of the things that are important, like they need to speak the language of the country they're in. And this is important for migrants, that they can engage in the society in which they come to, that they can get jobs, that they can create careers, that their children can get education, that they can be part of that society, and that they can contribute to all aspects of that society. And being able to speak the language of the country is critically important. But it's also critically important that they don't lose their language of origin, because this is important for themselves and their children and so on and so forth, to be able to keep the link back to their relatives and the wider connections in that society, in that community. And there's a need for the dominant culture to accommodate to diversity. And again, this is a big problem in Europe. It's a big problem in North America. And indeed, it's a big problem we can see in places like Australia and New Zealand as well. So I would hope that this is something that maybe is less of a problem in Southeast Asia, but I haven't been here long enough to see. But I think it's really important that the dominant culture accommodates the diversity and includes all of the nuance that exists in the cultural landscape that exists here in Southeast Asia. Okay, we just move on to the next slide. Now, social capital here, I've taken something from the Red Cross here on the left-hand side, because I think it's a really good example. It shows it very well what social capital is, and the social capital people are probably a little bit more aware of. But social capital, it's important for us to remember that social capital is generated to a huge extent in education and training contexts. And when we engage in education and training, we need to be highly conscious that we are also allowing for the generation of social capital. So it isn't just what we're teaching, it's not just what happens in the classroom, virtual or real or hybrid, it's also around the connections and links that we make. And the making of social capital is really, really important for the learners. And I suppose there are more opportunities for extending social capital today in a digital world, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we can extend our social capital outside of our normal connections, our normal links. There is a tendency, and this is, I suppose, become part of a problem in the digital age, where people kind of migrate into silos of interest groups and so on and so forth. And if you do this, then you're cutting off opportunities for extending your social network. So when we talk about social capital, we're talking about the networks, together with shared norms, values, and social trust that facilitate coordination and cooperation for mutual benefit within and between groups. So these are all the connections and links that you have. They help us to share norms and values and social trust. And we can see this in relation to, it's very interesting to look at this in relation to COVID and the uptake, we'll say, of vaccinations and so on and so forth. In those societies where social capital was highest, people were more inclined to take the vaccines and participate in the various mitigation and so on and so forth. So capital is around the breadth, depth, and richness of networks. And our social networks could be quite deep and quite rich, but they might not be as broad as they could and should be. And that would be beneficial for us. And this is one of the reasons why training and education are so important in terms of bringing us to new networks. And it's about, trust and networks and participation and norms of reciprocity and so on and so forth. And we see this, of course, so reciprocity is really, really important, and civility is really, really important. And again, as somebody who's visiting Southeast Asia, I can see these values are very, very, very high in this society. Reciprocity and respect and so on and so forth are really, really high, much higher than they are, in my experience, in Europe. And there's the knowledge required for active participation in political, economic, and social life of their communities. So, in terms of knowing who people are, knowing where job opportunities are, knowing where the schools are, know who you can call upon to fix something for you, where's the best place to buy something. All of these things are social capital. And if you're a newcomer into a society, then you can be very much lacking in the necessary social capital to really thrive in that area. But I just want to really emphasize that social capital, through education and training processes, we do enable the accumulation of social capital. And social capital is extremely important in terms of the future career trajectories of individuals, and also for them personally and socially, and in terms of the potential advantages for their families and so on. So maybe we can just move on. And I just wanted to start here with the first one is about positive and negative structural determinants of social capital. So in a sense, we can see many examples of negative structural determinants. And in some ways, these may be being driven by the internet, because there are possibilities, I suppose, to share these very negative values. And we have seen a lot of homophobic, xenophobic, racist intolerance emerging through what would be negative structural determinants. So it's really, really important that we engage with and support positive structural determinants, things that create positivity, that create opportunity, that create a better future and a better space for us. So that's really, really, really important. I'm talking in the next point about the strength of weak social ties. Now, weak social ties are those kinds of links that we have with people that we know, but they're not members of our family, they're not necessarily members of our community, they're not close friends. They're called weak social ties. But they are people that we know. And again, in education and training, we get an opportunity to go outside our own circle. And that's really important in terms of our futures, in terms of our careers, in terms of places we can go to. And it's making those links, finding out about jobs, finding about new career directions, finding out about new technologies, finding about all of these things are very much linked to the capacity to be able to make contact with people outside of our normal networks. And again, through education and training, we get many of these things. And I suppose the critical thing is that we can use these weak social ties to create more weak social ties. But if we're constantly in our own circle, in our own little world, then we can have very deep and very rich social ties, but we don't have the links and bridges to other places and other opportunities. And the other thing which I mentioned here are the hop and skip relationships and hop and skip people. So hop and skip relationships and hop and skip people, we're talking about people who are very good at networking and very good at making connections. And through education and training, these hop and skip people get more opportunities to make those kinds of connections, and those people can help all of us to get to other places and to open new doors and new opportunities. Okay, so we just move on to the next slide. And the final slide I'm going to talk about is human capital. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because although, you know, it may be the critical one, I think it's the one that you probably are most familiar with and you are dealing with most often. So I don't think I need to emphasize too much on it. What I will say is that human capital in this age is one that is constantly changing and is constantly in demand of being updated. But in order to accumulate human capital, you need to have capital in all of the other 4 areas as well. So it can't be seen in isolation. So human capital is the knowledge, skills, competencies, and attributes embodied in individuals that facilitate the creation of personal, social, and economic well-being. So it's about our capacity to work and thrive in the workplace. It's what skills we have and so on and so forth. It's the intrinsic wealth that resides in people's skills and knowledge that contributes to their economic productivity. So basically, human capital is the capital that you can spend in order to get a job, get a career. But it is impacted by the other 4, and in turn, it impacts the other 4. So there's somewhat of a circle here where they're all feeding into each other. So just move maybe to the next slide. And I just wanted to just emphasize a few points here that I think are really, really important. The first, in relation to the World Bank, they said human capital is often the only asset the poor have. So this is important. So in terms of that no one is left behind, if we can create human capital for people, then it creates the world for them. And I must say that I have been highly impressed with what I have seen in relation to community projects that are developing human capital in Southeast Asia. I've seen some of the most, I would say, not some of, the most creative and far-reaching types of human capital development projects here. But all of those projects are also premised on the 4 other types of capital. But you know, so the human capital is really, really important, and it is a capacity for people to change their whole existence. And it's dependent on better education. So the quality of education and training is critical in terms of creating good human capital, but it's also dependent on health. So it's also dependent on other factors. It's also dependent on, I would say, things like cultural capital. It's dependent on identity capital. It's dependent on your seed capital, your capacity to engage, your capacity to actually get into the system. So you can't really accumulate human capital unless you have those things in your portfolio as well. The next 2 points I think are important, and I alluded to them earlier, but skills from formal education may become obsolete if not maintained. So it's absolutely the case that in education and training, and especially in technical education and training, the world is constantly changing. What we knew and needed 5 years ago is different to now. So our skills, our human capital can become obsolete very, very quickly, and we should not be over-reliant on the idea that you've got some qualification. The fact that you've got a qualification, yes, it brings you to a certain point, but you have to continue your journey. And the other point that's really important is that informal education creates a range of skills through varied life and work experiences. And it's important that we validate the informal learning and the informally created human capital as well. And you can see this in myriads of directions and myriads of ways. So it's in all kinds of areas and all kinds of places. So just move on to the next slide, and then I'll wrap up. Now, I think this is these things are critically important, this idea about currency. What I mean by currency is that we have to be in the here and now, and we have to be constantly vigilant of creating training and education processes and so on that are, for now, that are current. The learner has to be at the center. So we have to be thinking about, what does the learner need? What does the learner need today? Well, it's clear that, you know, when you look at what ChatGPT told us at the beginning in terms of future careers, that we're not going to be able to create the human capital that will be constantly current for the rest of the person's career. We can give them skills for now, but those skills are going to become obsolete. So we have to be constantly vigilant in relation to helping the learner to stay current and putting the learner at the center of things. We have to be responsive. What I mean by that is that we need to be responsive now. So when something new happens, there's new change, there's new technologies come on board, we have to be ready now and responsive to that technology, not waiting for 2 or 3 or 5 years. We have to be flexible. So we have to create training and education processes that are flexible, that have the learner at the center of things, that operate around the learner's needs. They have to be in different formats. We can talk about degrees and PhDs, but we can talk about apprenticeships. We can talk about micro-credentials. We can talk about a whole range of things in relation to flexible options. We have to respect autonomy, and this is important because we shouldn't be trying to force people in certain career directions. Some of the most successful people have been people who have taken the path that was not indicated for them, but they could see that there were other opportunities in other areas and other directions. So we need to be respectful of that, because sometimes the learner has a good idea of what their own capabilities are and so on and so forth. Of course, we can advise them and help them, but we need to respect that they have a choice as well. We have to be relevant in addressing the issues of our time. So it's important that whatever skills and so on and so forth we're engaged with, that they are the ones that people need now, and that they are ones that will help them to future-proof themselves. Because people, I suppose one of the critical things we can help people with is giving them the capacity to learn, giving them the capacity to be curious, give them the capacity to be critical, be analytical, all of these things, because they would be the kinds of constant skills that the people would need in order to keep themselves updated into the future. So just when I move on to the final slide, which I think is about asking questions and comments. And if you want to, you can, the QR code on the left-hand side there, if you want to copy that QR code, it will bring you to the book chapter, which I've speak in more detail around the 5 capitals, you can get it there. And if you want to engage me directly, the other QR code on the right side will get you my email address and so on and so forth. So wrap it up there, and we can go on to questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Simus Otama, for your insightful presentation and sharings for our webinar this morning. I would like to invite you to stay for Q&A sessions which our participant may have some questions regarding to your topic. Distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to the Q&A sessions. So if you have any concerns, any questions, please drop or type in the chat box so that I can infer your question to Dr. Professor Simus Otama for his clarification. Thank you. Okay, so I have collected some questions from our participants so far. So I would like to share this question on screen so that Professor can see the questions and respond to them. So let me share the screen first.
Excuse me for interrupt, Mr. Jumrong.
Yes, please.
I can see some participants raise their hand, so we can give the opportunity for them to ask directly to Dr. Simos, if you can.
Okay, so we have Christian. Christian, do you have any questions? Please turn on your mic and ask to Professor. Christian? Christian Kinsik, are you there?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I think I wrongly raised my hand, so I'm sorry. I don't have any question yet.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, so let me share the question that I collected from the participants. Can you see my slide? So far we have these questions. The first question is, if we have the forgotten 90%, does it mean that only 10% of the population have received adult education? Is there still a chance for the forgotten 90% to receive adult education? From Madame Cynthia, Principal 1 of Palapas National High School, Legal City, Philippines. Please, Professor.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. I think the point is that I think what the quote was trying to say is that there's a tendency for those that are best placed to continue to be best placed. That those that that get a lot, get more, and so on and so forth. And the big challenge and big difficulty for us is that there are people who are outside of the education system, they're outside of the formal education system, and there's absolutely nothing happening for them in terms of education and training. and there's no place for them to get onto the ladder. And this is why the seed capital is so important. It's giving them an opportunity. So I'm sorry. Basically, I think in order for us to bridge that gap, we need more community-based educational processes. And I've seen some of these really, really good projects in Southeast Asia. So we can do it. We know how to do it, but we just need to do more of it to capture that 90% forgotten. And then sorry, somebody at my door here. Yeah, I think that's critically important in terms of changing the dynamic around the those that are forgotten and those who are excluded. We really need to be more challenging in that regard. Can you just excuse me just for one moment?
Professor, please unmute yourself.
Now, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes, can hear.
Sorry about that. My apologies. I'm in my hotel and somebody was coming to clean my room. So, what is the next question?
So, can we move to the next question? Yeah, let me share again. So the second question is, what are the examples of social capital that can be done by education institution? This is from Anonymous.
That's okay. Okay, so okay, in terms of social capital, well, I mean, I think we are beginning to see more, I think, awareness in the education system around social capital. Certainly, I see this in primary and secondary education in my country, and I think it's probably more of a global phenomenon where things like different religious festivals and different ethnic traditions and so on and so forth are brought into the school and are celebrated in the schools. So I think that's one critical way in which we can do that in the education system. But I think we also have to ensure that when we do something, that we are respectful of the social capital of the individuals. In my department, in my institution, for instance, we very recently ran a leadership program for women from an ethnic minority in Ireland called the Irish Travellers. Irish Travellers are the most marginalised and discriminated against minority. All of the metrics around health, longevity, housing, education, work, careers, wealth, all of these things there at the bottom of the heap. In terms of engaging with the formal education system, there can very often be a reticence by Irish Travellers to engage, because for many Irish Travellers, they feel that it will dilute their cultural values, and that through the formal education system, which does not acknowledge traveller culture, that their children or adults engage in this education system will have their culture diluted. And of course, that is an existential threat. So we have to be conscious of people's cultural identity, and we have to be clear that our ambition is not to dilute their cultural identity. So when we ran this program for these women, these traveller women, we engaged in a co-design process. So they were part of the design of the course. They were the ones who said, we have to include these cultural values from our community in terms of what leadership means in our community. So I think these are the values. And in relation to migrant and ethnic minorities especially, but not just those, but for other protected minorities and protected groups, it's important that whatever we do that it has value in their culture and not just in the dominant culture of the society and the dominant culture of the community. I hope that answered that question.
Thank you very much, Professor. Now, please hear from Kerjasma B. Ayu. Do you have any question, please?
Thank you. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, of course, we can hear.
Yeah. This is Adrianus from Binangsana University, Indonesia. Professor, I would like to ask you about the capital that you have already explained and elaborated so far. Among the 5 capital you have explained, which one come first? And which one is the most essential of all capitals, according to your experience? Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think they're all important, but unless we have seed capital, then it's very, very difficult to accumulate many of the other capitals, and it's especially difficult to accumulate human capital. And as I mentioned in the slides, human capital can very often be the only wealth, the only way in which a person can progress. So I would say that in terms of the ones who are most excluded and most left behind, then seed capital is the critically most important one. But we can see that social capital can be really, really important in terms of creating opportunities. So you may have, you may have qualifications and so on and so forth, but unless you have contacts and links, it can sometimes be very difficult for you to progress your career. And identity capital is important because, it's about who you are as an individual, how you understand who you are, what kind of confidence you have. And, that can be important in terms of you pursuing other educational processes as well. I think all of the capitals are important. There isn't one that we can just say is more important than the others, except we can say for the most disadvantaged and excluded ones, probably seed capital is probably the most important one, because without that, they can't really accumulate the other ones. So I think at some levels it's a kind of a circle, but I would say that that all of these capitals are really important. It's hard to say that one is more important than the other, except for those maybe who are at the bottom of the heap. Then I think certainly seed capital is critical for them.
Yeah, Professor, can I say human capital and social capital is the most essential capital for us to build our what do you call that, our career?
Yes, of course.
Is that so? Oh, okay.
No, that's absolutely true. I don't disagree with that. But you were speaking from a different place than somebody who has absolutely no education, absolutely no digital literacy, absolutely sort of no career prospects, and they're outside of the system. For them, of course, human capital and social capital are critically important for them. But what kind of human capital are they going to accumulate that's of significant value unless they have the seed capital to get into the system? And this is why it's really important for us to create the opportunity for them to get into the system, to get onto the ladder, to get in there. Because once they start accumulating capital, then they can invest more of their seed capital and they can progress with their careers and so on.
Yeah, thank you so much. Professor, and Mr. Rin,
Thank you
moderator.
very
Thank you.
much. Thank you very much, Professor, again, and Mr. Kaichasama, PIU, for your clarification. Now, we have people, Sun Yun So. Do you have any question? Sun Yun So. Okay. Let's move to Madame Cynthia. Do you have any extra question, please?
Yes, good morning, Sir Chamrong. Good morning, Sir Dr. Simos. I have a follow-up question regarding the capitals that Mr. Adrianos had asked a while ago. There are 5. So we have the seed, the identity, autonomy, cultural, and the human capital. According to Dr. Simmons a while ago, human capital should be able to accumulate first the 4 previous capitals before we can avail of the human capital. What if, according to the World Bank, as presented in this slide, human capital is often the only asset the poor have. So if the poor have only this asset, the human capital, and they cannot avail of the 4 previous capitals, what is the chance for them to enjoy lifelong learning or adult education if there is no chance for them to accumulate these 4 other capitals?
Yeah. No. Okay. So I think this is why I put a lot of emphasis on the seed capital, because it's so important. Now, of course, it's hard to imagine somebody who doesn't have any human capital. I think everybody has human capital. You know, everybody has some skills or some things that they can do, and so on and so forth. But the value of those skills and the value back to them for those skills, sometimes the remuneration, the payment for that can be very, very low, and maybe it just consigns them to constant subsistence, and that they can never progress in any meaningful way in terms of accumulating the wealth, you know, in terms of cash and career and housing and all of those things that they need. This is why the seed capital is so important, because we have countless examples of when an opportunity is created for somebody to start their learning journey, wherever that start is, and it can be a very modest start. It can be at a very, 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 very basic level. It creates an opportunity for the person to take the next step and the next step. And that's what I mean by the seed capital and being able to invest. I remember many years ago, I was on an interview panel for what we call mature students in my university. And mature students are somebody who is over the age of 23 can apply to come into a degree program without any prior qualifications, based entirely on their life experience. And that policy has been there for long, many years. This woman presented to the interview panel, and she described her learning journey, her portfolio. Her portfolio started with things like flower arranging, you know, which is arranging flowers to make them look nice in a vase for your house. Okay, you can say, well, you know, this is a very basic kind of course. What does that do? So she starts with flower arranging. Then she does first aid, you know, how to put a bandage on a cut, how to deal with a burn in the home, these kinds of things. And then she does something else, and then she does something else. And then she's doing maybe something like, at the time, was the, you know, a basic computer course, maybe. You know, and maybe something else. And eventually, over time, this woman creates a portfolio because she's able to invest her seed capital and so on and so forth. But for very many people, they currently feel disabled. because they don't know about the next step. They don't have the next step. So you can say that's actually a deprivation of social capital. And that's why I spoke about the weak social ties, because they don't have connections with people who can tell them where they can go next or what they might be able to do, and so on and so forth, because they may be in a very rich social capital context, but it's circumscribed. It's within their own community, so they don't have the connections outside of the community. So I think what's really important for those that are most marginalized and most left behind is that we have to proactively engage in creating seed capital at community level, at the most basic level. And I've seen really good examples of that here in Southeast Asia.
But that is one of our concerns here, Doctor, in the Philippines, because most of the under poor sector in the Philippines, the seed capital is not really given importance. Most of the parents, especially the older generation, did not really receive formal education. That's why most of their children do not really show interest in continuing their formal education, especially in the higher level. So, based from the example that you have mentioned, I remember that we have this alternative learning system available in the Philippines, where we offer education for the poor students, especially the elder ones. Even if you are already a senior citizen, you can still avail of the alternative learning system. So it's good to know that alternative learning system is also part of the need of our students, especially those who belong in the poor sector. So I think the answer to my question is already answered by you, Doctor. Thank you very much.
I can, what you're saying is really, really interesting. And I can give you an anecdote from a piece of research that I did a few years ago in my own city in Cork, where I was working, this group of older women were involved in a project in second level school, in a girls' second level school, where they were dealing with skills, handicraft skills and so on and so forth, which they were handing on to the younger girls. But as it turned out, and what I was interested in was the engagement between them, because in many ways these older women were almost like surrogate grandparents, and there was a lot of mutual learning between the two generations. Well, one of the women, who's a woman in her 60s, or maybe her early 70s, I asked her, how did you get involved in this group, and what encouraged you to get involved? And she said, well, I never did any learning. I never did anything after school, and I never, ever engaged in any educational process. But she said, I was bringing my mother, her mother, remember now, was probably in her 80s at least, or maybe early 90s, to a daycare center where she started learning art. And her mother, who was in her 90s, said to her little girl, who was in her 60s, maybe you should be doing some learning as well. And this woman got involved. So educating older people is critically important. And I pointed that out in terms of the statistics show that if your parent is involved in any kind of an educational process, any kind of a formal education or training process, it's much more likely that the children will as well, because the parent will influence the children to do this. And I think this is one of the critical things that's often forgotten and lost, because the idea is that we invest in the younger age group, but unless we're also investing in the older people who influence them and see the value of it, then the children are not going to continue into it. So that's critically important. I think it's a really good point.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Yes, Madam Cynthia. Thank you, Professor and Madam Cynthia. Now we have more question. So this topic become very popular. So let me read the question from the chat box. That is from Ms. Chanda, Deputy Principals from Santat Songpo, Cambodia. She asked regarding to identity capital, it is very important for every country to have their own identity. How does a country preserve their identity for better and last long via education? Professor, please clarify this.
Okay. It's important, I suppose, that to remember that every country has multiple identities. I've only been in Cambodia since yesterday, but I can see straight away that there are lots and lots and lots of identities here. So I think it's not a question of trying to find a single identity. It's like a, you know, it's like maybe food. Food, you can have a single ingredient food. So maybe you eat a mango and you say, well, that's, you know, just a mango, and then it's beautiful and it's nice and so on and so forth. Or you can eat a food that I got here in the street yesterday, a soup with all kinds of fish and vegetables and all kinds of different tastes and textures in it. You know, so all of those things create together a certain kind of a cultural identity. So I think especially in Europe and North America, people have become obsessed with the idea that identity is a single thing, that there's only one way of expressing identity. And I think it's really, really important that identity can be expressed in a multiplicity of ways. The reality is that the collection and the multiplicity of dynamics that create the cultural context in Cambodia is different to what is going to be in Laos or Thailand or Vietnam. But each one of those in their own ways are equally complex, equally diverse. There's going to be some of the same ingredients in there, but once I arrive in Cambodia, I know I'm in a different country. You know, so I think there's maybe too much fear about the extent to which our cultural values can be taken and so on and so forth. I think we need to be more trustful of young people as well, because we all were young once and we wanted to do our own things as well. So I think we just need to have a more open mind around it, and like it's important to acknowledge that culture and identity are constantly changing. No society stays fixed in time. What Cambodia was like 100 years ago is significantly different than it is now. It is significantly different than it was 100 years before that and 100 years before that. So society is constantly changing, but it was still Cambodia, and it will be in Cambodia in 100 years as well.
Thank you very much, Professor. Professor, can you stay for a few more questions?
I'm happy. I'm happy to.
Yes, thank you very much, because our participant has a very important question. That from DK Haji Mastina, PGHE Damit from Brunei has one question for you. Can you describe a time when accumulated human capital was vital in addressing difficult challenges and achieving significant milestone in career? Did you get it?
Sorry, I didn't get all of that. Can you just maybe repeat it for me?
Okay. Again, can you describe a time when accumulated human capital was vital in addressing a difficult challenge or achieving a significant milestone in career?
Okay. So, right. I think one of the critical things here in relation to accumulation of human capital that is important in our system in my university, for instance, is that gaining access to many of the programs that we offer in our adult and continuing education section is premised on recognition of prior experience and prior learning. So basically, many people get access to our programs on the basis of the human capital that they have already accumulated. So it's important, I suppose, that we recognize and validate human capital that is often accumulated in the workplace or in social contexts or in other places. And I think this is a really, really important element. And it's not unrelated to the conversation we were having earlier about seed capital. For instance, a lot of the people who maybe are in underemployment or in employment areas that have very low levels of remuneration, they have human capital. And it's a question of us acknowledging that human capital as part of the capital, the seed capital that they have to invest. Because that changes the paradigm for somebody quite significantly, because you're now acknowledging and you're now recognizing that they actually have some training and learning. It may have come in an informal context, but they have learned a skill in the workplace. It might be an informal workplace, it might be in a marginal workplace, it might be in a marginal situation, but they have accumulated certain human capital. So that's definitely the case, that very many people through human capital have been able to accumulate it and demonstrate it through recognition of prior learning processes and other processes, and then they've been able to go to the next step in terms of their career. I hope I'm answering the question in the way that the person required.
Thank you very much. Another questions from our participant is, what are possible teaching strategy to develop human capital holistically? Please.
Sorry, again, there's a little bit of fluff on the noise. So, can you say it to me again, please?
Okay, yeah. I repeat. What are possible teaching strategies to develop human capital holistically?
Okay. Yeah. So I think, look, I mean, the contexts are critical here, so I can't speak on every context. But one of the contexts that I can speak about is a model that we have been using, which is called symbiotic learning paradigm. And the symbiotic learning paradigm is around the idea that we include as many stakeholders as possible in the design of the program. So, for instance, we would include employers, we would include educators, we would include learners, and as many people as possible around the table to help co-design a program. And I think that leads to a more holistic approach, because employers will have one set of priorities, educators will have different priorities, learners will have different priorities, and together through conversations we can create a more holistic approach. But I think the one thing that we absolutely have to be very, very, very conscious of is the needs of the learner, because ultimately everything we do in education and training is around the learner. So we have to really, really prioritize that in terms of creating a holistic approach.
Thank you so much. Anyway, we have a few more questions in the chat. That from Mary Grace Campos. He asks, instead of living in a technology-driven era, is it a disadvantage for our learner, affecting their critical thinking skill using the chat GPT or AI nowadays to fulfill their tasks given by teacher? Because they can just rely on that, knowing that it is ease of access.
Okay. Yeah, I can see the point. And that's why I did a slide myself using ChatGPT, because I just wanted to demonstrate that, of course, it can be a threat, but it also can be a tool. It also can be useful. Now, I've held the view for a long time that the internet is and can be a part of our memory. It's like a part of our memory that is not on our brain, but we can call on this by doing searches. So we can search and we can inquire and we can ask. And in a sense, artificial intelligence is the same. So our task really is to reconceptualize what it is we're doing as educators and trainers. So we don't have to be replicating what ChatGPT can do for us. But the point that the questioner raised, and I think it's a really, really important point, is the capacity to be critical thinkers and be analytical thinkers. So, I mean, I think it was interesting when I was doing the ChatGPT thing, there was a little line at the bottom of the screen which says, ChatGPT can make mistakes too. You know, so it was basically acknowledging that everything you get in ChatGPT, don't take this as absolutely, completely true and perfect. And the slide I gave you this morning, don't take that as absolutely true and perfect. I'm sure it's probably accurate enough, but it's not absolutely the case. But, you know, it's giving, we have to maintain our capacity to be critical thinkers. That's one skill that's going to be needed anytime, right into the future. And we have to maintain the capacity to be analytical thinkers. And to be honest about it, we can see so much of this happening in the world today, where people are neither critical thinkers or analytical thinkers, and they jump to conclusions and they say things that are not based in fact or based in any known reality. So I think as educators, this is a really, really, really important thing that we need to do, is really focusing on the students' capacities to be critical thinkers. I'll give you an example. I was listening to the radio in my own country. This is about 2 years ago, and there was a primary school teacher teaching children who were aged 5 and 6. And one of the things he was doing was analyzing TV advertisements coming up to Christmas. In Ireland, Christmas is a big thing. So coming up to Christmas, the children get to ask for gifts for Christmas, and they ask for gifts from Santa and so on and so forth. And they're watching TV advertisements, and then they put pressure on the parents and say, oh, I want the thing that I've seen on the TV. What the teacher was doing in the classroom was taking those adverts and asking the kids to critique the advertisements. Say, what is the ad really saying? Can you analyze the advertisement? And amazingly, these 5 and 6 year olds were capable of dissembling the advert. Once they were given the tools to do it, they could look at the advert and they could say, oh, wow, hang on a second. This isn't all that the advert is telling me. So we can be critical thinkers at any age. And I think as educators and trainers, we really need to emphasize that point with people.
Thank you very much, Professor. So now we have 3 more questions. We will go to Dr. Indra. And I would like Professor briefly answer to this question, because we just have 3 more minutes. Question from Mr. Kian Bun Lim. Maybe an education act for compulsory education can support the development of seed capital. Furthermore, we are in digital era now. Do you have any comment on this, Professor?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, compulsory education is useful. Of course, it is. And we have seen the benefits of that in Europe and other countries where there's compulsory education up to a certain level and so on. But even in compulsory education, a lot of people fall through the cracks. And unless you're offering quality education, then you're not necessarily going to be able to create seed capital for everybody. But it's certainly really, really important dimension of what we do. But in my country, where compulsory primary education goes back to the 1840s, so you know, you can do the maths on that. That's 170 or 180 years ago. So there's a lot of generations of people have been through the primary school compulsory education. We still have people with low literacy skills, low numeracy skills, and very low digital skills leaving our education systems. So it's a bigger challenge. Of course, it would make a significant impact, no question about that. If everybody is in a school system and they have to go to a school system, no question about that, and I would be an absolute advocate of that. But we still have to do more. It's not going to solve all of our problems.
Thank you, Professor. The last question from the chat box, from Polytechnics Brunei. One of the most difficult things to do is changing mindset. What can we do to ensure that everyone in society is on board toward lifelong learning, especially in digital era? Please briefly respond, Professor.
The question is on to one of my favorite topics, and this is about cognitive flexibility. And cognitive flexibility is the capacity for us to see the world in a new and a different way. And I think adult education, above all other areas of education, has the capacity to help people in relation to cognitive flexibility. I had a conversation with somebody, maybe not yesterday, maybe the day before, where I was talking about lifelong learning, and they were not exactly, they were struggling to understand what I was talking about. And lifelong learning is what we as human beings do all of the time. So I've learned a lot this morning. I hope other people have learned as well. When I leave my room to go downstairs in the hotel, I'm going to learn something on that journey. For sure, I'm going to learn something. When I walk out onto the street, I'm going to learn something. Everywhere I am, I'm going to be learning something. And I think this is the critical thing that we need to imbue in people, is the realization that they are learners. The realization that they are constantly learning. And the realization that they should be seeking opportunities to learn absolutely everywhere. And I think once people get into that frame of thinking, then I think you can really, that really is a paradigm shifter. And, you know, there's an infinite number of directions we can go once we get to there. But I think that's the place to start with people, for them to realize what it is they are themselves.
Thank you very much, Professor. Let me move to Dr. Andra. Do you have any concern, please?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Hello, Professor Seamus. Let me introduce myself. I'm Indra. I'm from Bina Insani University, Indonesia. Just a short question. What steps shall we make or shall we take in order to introduce digitalization to the adult rural people with low of digital literacy? We need to know the concrete steps that we should make especially in the Indonesian case? Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. So, like, I can understand there are probably places where there is almost no internet connectivity, and that's a problem. But I remember, this is maybe 4 or 5 years ago, being in South Africa, and one of the things I noticed was that there was public places for people to charge their mobile phones. So they were all charging their phones in this place on the street because, you know, they probably had no electricity in their houses or whatever. But all of those people had digital skills. They may not have been the digital skills that are absolutely necessary in the workplace, but they have digital skills. And I give you another anecdote. My brother-in-law, who is in his 70s, and he left school maybe when he was 12, and he got no formal schooling since then. He's got an iPad, and he's doing all kinds of things on his iPad. So he's got digital skills. Of course, he's not able to, you know, engage in generative AI. We know that, but he does have digital skills. So I think one of the things that we have to do in terms of really the practical, you're saying a practical step, is that we need to create a scenario where people have access, number one, to the internet. And I think that's the critical first point, that we have to create access. And again, I mean, that's a challenge in all kinds of countries. It's a challenge in my country as well, where we have what we call digital broadband, which is, you know, a whole government project to ensure that there's high-speed broadband right throughout the country. And it's a big undertaking. It's a big task. It's a huge task. No question about that. But that's where we need to go. We need to create access. That's the very first point, because we can talk all day about digital skills, but if people have no access to the internet, they have no access, you know, to these things, so their digital skills are meaningless then. So I would say, as the first practical step, and it's a huge one, and I know the scale in Indonesia really makes the problem in Ireland look very, very small, because of the scale and the number of people that are there, and the scale and size of the physical demands of the country itself, in terms of the infrastructure that you have to put in. But I think that's ultimately what needs to be done. And in the meantime, I suppose what you can do, and you know, it's been done in other places, is you can create hubs where people can access internet. You know, so maybe they don't get it directly to themselves, but there are places where they can have access to it, maybe in a village or whatever. And then I think you can begin to expand once you get to there.
Thank you so much, Professor and Dr. Andra. I think because of the shortening of time, can we delay another 5 minutes, Doctor?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We have Nom Atuk. You have raised hand for a long time. Do you have any concern? Please. Nom Atuk. Okay, so let me move to questions from Marite Batak. Is human capitalism more important than advancement of technology? Professor, please.
Is human capital more important?
Yeah, more important than advancement of technology.
Oh, I mean, they're not one or the other. You know, they're not. So, I mean, with advancement in technology, we are going to need new forms of human capital. So, you know, advancement in technology is what's happening in the world. If you, for instance, if you went back 300 years ago, people still needed human capital. They needed to be able to do things. They needed to be able to achieve things, but the technology they had was completely and absolutely different. So basically, we have to keep our human capital abreast with the changes in the technology. And we have to create the conditions where people can continue to renew their human capital. And that's why, I said in I think maybe the second last or last slide, that human capital deriving from the formal system becomes obsolete. It becomes obsolete over time. So you may have a degree or a PhD or an apprenticeship or whatever it is, but you can't assume that the human capital that you have today is going to be still absolutely the human capital that you will need in 5 or 10 years' time. So human capital is constantly being renewed and changed. So it's not a question of either or, they have to move in tandem. But to avail of advances in technology, then we will need to advance at the same pace in terms of our human capital.
Thank you, Professor. What about Sun Yun So? Do you have any question, please? Again. No. The last question, Professor, from Joel Gopal. As educator, how can we develop the seed capital in order for our learners to accumulate other capitals? Professor, please.
Yeah, I think the first thing, I suppose, is that we have to address the learner where they are. That's the first thing. So we have to be cognizant of who our learners are and where our learners are. Many years ago, a long, long time ago now, I was visiting some relatives in the United States, and in our conversations, my host, the woman, said, I'm an adult educator. I teach literacy skills to recent migrants to the United States. And so I spoke to her about it, and she described her first night in her class. So she said she had to go and get training in order to do this. So she went to a class, an actual classroom at the time, and the teacher comes into the classroom. There's a group of people in the classroom, there's 20 people in the classroom. And they're in there and they're sitting with their notebooks and they're all ready to go. These are educated people who've got university degrees and so on and so forth. The person comes into the room and addresses them in Russian. Goes immediately to the blackboard and starts writing in the Cyrillic script. And the students are there looking, and this hands start going up. So, what's going on? We've no idea what's going on. We can't understand Russian. We can't understand this thing. And then the person spoke to them in English and said, now you understand what it's like for somebody with low levels of literacy skills. And it was a good lesson for them, in a sense, to realize that, you can't presume that your learner is starting from where you are. You have to start from where the learner is. So I think in terms of seed capital, we need to get right back to the learner and focus in, where is the learner now? Or where do they want to get to? Of course, we can encourage them and advise them and so on and so forth, but we need to start from where they are. And with some people, that seed capital is going to be very, very, very low. Others are going to have more seed capital. But in order to help people to generate it, well, then that's where we have to start. We have to start with the learner.
Thank you so much, Professor. Distinguished guests, participant, ladies and gentlemen, because of the time constraint, I think you still have more questions to ask Professor, but as the time has come to the end, I would like to wrap up a little bit before we end the webinar. So what Professor have shared with us. So Professor have shared discussed mainly on the scaffolding VFI learning capitals, which are a very hot topic to be learned by the participants, such as seed capital, identity capitals, cultural capitals, and social capitals. And last is human capital. Yes, and he also shares wake-up call for 2023, such as artificial intelligent AI, robots, piece of technology, change, war and peace, climate crisis, letting no one behind in the digital every age. This is a very important lesson to learn for today. I think very beneficial for participants from this webinar. And he also highlighted the expert industrialization regarding to the technology, which is good for consideration for career and education changes. And also he mentioned the ChatGPT tech job in 2023, tech job in next 5 years, tech job 2043, which is important for individuals seeking for a career in tech to stay adaptable, continually learn and be ready to embrace emerging technology industries. He also elaborates and make clarifications to a lot of questions has been raised by our participants this morning. I hope all this clarification is satisfying for you. And thank you very much, Dr. Professor Samus Otoma, for your kind sharings to our webinar today. And we wish you all the best and have a wonderful visit to Cambodia. And distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, now the program has come to the end, but please give us your feedback and comments by filling out the evaluation form via the link given on the screen and in the chat box. E-certificate will be offered to you through your email for those who successfully fill the form out. I would like to officially end the session, and I would like to apologize for any unintentional mistakes and technical errors. Thank you very much again to our eminent speakers, Dr. Professors Toma, and all participants, and hope to see you all in the next webinars. Please stay safe and healthy, and we will see you again at the near futures. So for evaluation form is also sent in the chat box so that you can fill it out. So our technical team, please have to drop the link in the chat box. Thank you very much, and enjoy your lunch. Thank you. Marksman, please mute yourself. Marksman. Lee, can you unmute? So once again, thank you very much for participation. See you next time. Doctor, please enjoy your time.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Say good night to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you much. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you
you.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Absent, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's
Allow me to
time to open our eyes to a bright and promising future. We'll rise to the call of the times and create a stronger tomorrow. Let's start to make a difference, teaching everyone to learn through science, health, and technology. We will share our expertise by promoting knowledge and policies. We can build a better world. Let us take a step for our visions alone, making futures for the people to grow.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roger Sama. Here you.
We'll achieve our goals through partnership, creating opportunities. By working hand in hand, we can accomplish all our dreams. For a better quality of life is now within our reach. Let us take a step for our visions alone, making futures for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and green. Here at SEAMEO, building the future is our legacy.